Joining us, columnist for the New York Times, David French, creator of Blow the Stack on Substack, Charles Blow, and co-host of The Weekend, Eugene Daniels. Charles, welcome to the show. It's nice to have you. It is hard to imagine that Donald Trump doesn't know about Patriot Front or what they did on July 4th. Why doesn't he just say, you're not welcome here?
It's consistent with what he has done before. He has refused to condemn the people who marched in Charlottesville. He has refused to condemn the Proud Boys. He not only refused to condemn the people who rioted at the Capitol, but he pardoned them or commuted their sentences. But you cannot say that he's hiding behind the mask of defending the First Amendment, because he has, in fact, repeatedly condemned protests of people he does not like. He repeatedly condemned BLM, Black Lives Matter. He repeatedly destroyed the career of Colin Kaepernick. He repeatedly condemned the people who were protesting on campus over the war in Gaza. He has no problem, no hesitation in condemning protests, though, and that doesn't, affect their First Amendment right to do those things. That cannot be the excuse. He cannot hide behind that. I think that what we are seeing here is that silence is not neutral. Silence is not benign. In a war against evil, you have the choice to vociferously condemn it or support it. And those are your only two options. And when you are silent, then you are acquiescing to it. You are allowing and you are granting permission.
What does this White House, David, think they're getting out of this?
That's a great question. I think the bottom line is this is not really hard to figure out. If Trump thinks people like him, even if they're flying a Confederate flag, even if they're marching in a white supremacist march, the last thing he's going to do is go out of his way to criticize them. But again, remember, this is a president who has issued just a mountain of racist statements, hateful statements throughout the course of his presidency. I mean, we just had a Supreme Court case where I believe it's Justice Kagan wrote out so that we could not turn away a lot of the racist things that came from Trump in his administration about Haitian immigrants, for example, in Springfield, Ohio, including things like poison the blood of our country. Look, it is correct and easy to say that these people have a First Amendment right to march. That's absolutely correct. That's been established since the Supreme Court said that Nazis had the right to march through Skokie, Illinois. You cannot stop them from marching because you don't like their point of view. That's basic Constitution 101. But the deeper and bigger issue is, why are we seeing such a resurgence of blatant and overt racism from the highest part of the country all the way to sort of the lowest level posters on Twitter? It's not long ago, Katie, you remember we were talking about dog whistles. Like, how do we interpret things like okay signs or subtle shadings of language? The era of the dog whistle is over. It's all bullhorns now, from the presidency to these marchers.
It's been over for a long time. But again, David, I guess what I'm just stuck on is we are a country where free speech exists, yes. We are a country of debate, and we're at our best when we are debating and we are allowing our best ideas to win. We have had this debate. The best idea did win. Why now? Donald Trump can only take advantage of this because something happened. Charles, I see you shaking your head. What do you want to say?
Well, I understand the point you're trying to make there. I do not think that the best idea ever won.
Really?
I think what we had, I do not. At every turn from Reconstruction forward, when Black people made progress, the backlash against that progress was intense. And it has happened every 50 or 60 years or so, from Reconstruction forward through the Civil Rights Movement. And then I guess I would always call the BLM the Civil Rights Movement of our time. And the backlash that you're seeing right now is a backlash against both the Black Lives Matter movement and Barack Obama as president. So, I am very cautious about saying that the best idea won, that that racism was crushed, that it
Well,
went away.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that what I'm saying is we didn't have presidents who looked at white supremacists marching and didn't say anything about it. When our presidents, our leaders were confronted with something like this, the society may not have caught up yet, but our leaders said it was not okay. Our leaders denounced it. Our leaders said they weren't welcome.
I think that is absolutely correct. I think that there was a period where people were ashamed to openly embrace racism, even if they benefited from it. Republicans benefited from racism for a very long time. They hid it in the attic. They pretended that it didn't exist. And when voting time came around, they openly benefited from it and knew that they were benefiting from it. But, you know, in polite society, they would say, oh, this is horrible. We don't want these people, all the things. There, I think that we are correct in framing the conversation this way. We now have a president who harkens back to presidents of old, when it was not a shameful thing to openly embrace racism. And now we have another one who is no longer ashamed. And because he's not ashamed, he gives the average citizen permission to also not be ashamed.
Eugene, jump in.
Thank you. Everybody's making really good points. And I think something that is really important when we're talking about this, especially when we're listening to the Interior Secretary, the representative of the administration, the representative of the president's movement, is obviously the question is not about free speech. The question is whether or not the free speech they were exhibiting on Saturday and that they exhibit all the time, is that appropriate? And is that welcome in the movement of this president? Is that welcome in the administration of this president? And why do these folks feel like they can come out of the woodwork, albeit wearing masks, right? So that shows that there's a little bit of shame in the work that they're doing. But why do they think it's okay to walk around saying they want to reclaim America as if someone took it from them? And every time we have this conversation, and we keep having it as a culture for the last decade at least, is that I go back to when I was in college and I was talking to a friend of mine who was an immigrant, family of immigrants. And she said, you know, you guys are going to have big issues when it becomes a majority minority country. And I was, 20 and idealistic. And I said, what do you mean? Oh, my God, that's not going to why would white people be so upset about that? And she said, because it is something different to realize that you no longer have the power. And numbers for a lot of people equal power. And I think that is what we're seeing. You're seeing this backlash that Charles was talking about because the folks with power are scared that the folks without power, when they get it, are going to do the same thing that was done to them. And I think that conversation is one that is really important. And this president has never been able to say a crossword about someone who may say something nice about him. You think about on January 6th, he said, let them in, get rid of the Magna Charters. Who cares? Because at the end of the day, they're not going to hurt me. And that is kind of how this president thinks. And I think it's how the folks that are in this Patriot Front, they know that.
David, is that what it is? A changing country and a backlash to it, and now a president who wants to harness that fear?
Sometimes I feel like, and I wrote this, that we're walking through a museum of wretched ideas right now, that we're seeing resurgent white supremacy. We're seeing resurgent interest in fascism. We're seeing resurgent interest in communism in parts of America. We're seeing 34% of young people express fondness for communism. We're seeing a rising anti-Semitism. It feels as if all of the worst ideas of the 20th century and before that are kind of bubbling up again, all at the same time. And part of this is because we have the worst possible moral leadership from this top of this country. He is giving room, he is giving life to terrible ideas. And I think it's absolutely correct that the sad thing is, arguments are never finally won or lost. You have to refight them every generation. Every generation has to encounter the truth. Every generation has to be taught the truth. Every generation has to fight through to live the high American ideals. And right now, it feels as if many of our American ideals are on the back foot.
Let me play Buddy Carter, representative from Georgia, Republican, on CNN talking about this.
That is not the soul of America. Look, we are all created equally. That is what our whole emphasis is based on here in this country. And I would just not ignore it, but I don't pay that much credence to it, because that does not represent the soul of America. We in America believe in equality. And that is simply not reflective, certainly not of the Republican Party. I can assure you of that.
I think there's some argument there about what it represents, but I wonder, taking the good part of that comment about the soul of America, we're about to go to the polling booth, all of us in this country, in November. Charles, do you expect there to be pushback from Americans to what we've been seeing?
I think so. And I think, before I even get to that, I want to say, Republicans cannot talk out both sides of their mouth. He's a Republican from Georgia. I'm here in Georgia. Georgia's joining the rest of the red states in trying to eliminate Black power, voting power, and representative power. You can't have it both ways. It's like people who enslaved people trying to have it both ways. There were some who were benevolent. They called it benevolence. They weren't cruel. They looked down on the people who were cruel, but they operated in the same system, benefited from the exact same system, got their wealth from the exact same system. So I'm not going to let him off the hook, because if you really believe that, then you need to be condemning the president who is not condemning this. You can't just come out and say, oh, well, this is not us. But in fact, the leader of your party is saying nothing that echoes what you are saying.